Hi everyone, my name is Patricia and I'm 67 years old. If you think this story is just about some ungrateful kids, trust me, it gets so much worse than that. But first, let me paint you a picture of who I was before everything changed. I spent 43 years married to my late husband, Marcus. We had 2 children together, my son Christopher, who's now 35, and my daughter Sophia, who's 32. For most of my adult life, I was what you'd call the typical devoted wife and mother. I put my dreams on hold, worked part-time jobs that fit around everyone else's schedules, and made sure my family never wanted for anything. When Marcus got sick with cancer 8 years ago, I became his full-time caregiver. I sold my small jewelry-making business that I'd built over 15 years to pay for his treatments. I cashed in my retirement accounts, took out a second mortgage on our home, and spent every waking moment making sure he was comfortable. The man I loved was slipping away, and I would have given anything to keep him with me just a little longer. But here's what nobody tells you about being a caregiver. You disappear. Piece by piece, day by day, you become invisible. Your needs don't matter. Your exhaustion doesn't count. Your grief starts before the person even dies because you're watching them fade away while you're drowning right alongside them. Marcus passed away 3 years ago, and I was left with nothing but memories and a mountain of medical debt. The house we'd built our life in, gone. My savings, wiped out. My sense of who I was without him, completely lost. That's when Christopher stepped in. My son, my firstborn, the little boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world. He found me a small but comfortable apartment in a nice neighborhood, helped me move in, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe things would be okay. "Mom, this is perfect for you," he'd said, looking around the 1-bedroom place with its little kitchen and cozy living room. "You'll be comfortable here, and it's close enough that we can check on you." I should have paid attention to that phrase. Check on you. Not visit you or spend time with you. Check on you. Like I was a houseplant that needed watering. For 2 years, I lived in that apartment. I made it my sanctuary. I painted the walls a warm yellow that reminded me of sunshine. I filled it with plants and photographs, and slowly, very slowly, I started to remember who Patricia was when she wasn't someone's wife or caregiver. I started a small online business selling handmade jewelry again. Nothing fancy, just simple. Pieces that made people smile. It wasn't bringing in much money, but it was mine. I joined a book club at the local library. I volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. I was building a quiet but fulfilling life. And here's something you need to understand. I wasn't a burden on anyone. I paid my own rent, bought my own groceries, managed my own affairs. I called Christopher and Sophia regularly, but I never asked them for money or help unless it was absolutely necessary. I was proud of my independence, especially after everything I'd been through, but apparently that wasn't enough for some people. The first sign something was wrong came about 6 months ago. Christopher started making comments about the apartment. "You know, Mom, this place is getting pretty expensive for what it is," he'd say during his monthly visits. "Have you thought about maybe finding somewhere more practical?" Practical. I hated that word. Then his wife, Brittany, started chiming in. Now, Brittany and I had never been particularly close, but we'd always been cordial. She was one of those people who smiled constantly, but somehow the smile never reached her eyes. Everything was always perfect and amazing and so blessed with her. But there was something calculating underneath all that sweetness. "Patricia, I saw this wonderful senior community the other day," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake concern. "They have activities and everything. Wouldn't that be so much better than being alone all the time?" Alone. Another word I was starting to hate. I wasn't alone. I had my book club friends, my volunteer work, my neighbors who I'd chat with in the Ames hallway. I had a life. But somehow Christopher and Brittany had decided that because I wasn't surrounded by people 24/7, I was lonely and needed to be taken care of. The comments became more frequent, more pointed. "Mom, at your age, don't you think it would be safer to be somewhere with medical staff available? You're not getting any younger, and this apartment has so many stairs. We worry about you all the time." They worried. How generous of them. But I brushed it off because I thought they genuinely cared. I thought their suggestions came from love, even if they were misguided. I had no idea what was really going on behind the scenes. The truth started to reveal itself in little ways. Christopher would walk through my apartment with a strange look in his eyes, like he was measuring it. Brittany would comment on my furniture, my decorations, asking where I'd gotten this or that piece. "Oh, this would look so good in our living room," she'd say, running her fingers along my antique coffee table that Marcus and I had bought on our honeymoon. I started to feel uncomfortable in my own home when they visited. There was something hungry in the way they looked at my space, my things, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was happening. Then came Thanksgiving. Christopher and Brittany hosted dinner at their house, and I was excited to spend time with my family. Sophia came too, with her boyfriend Jake. It had been months since we'd all been together, and I thought it would be wonderful. But something was off from the moment I walked in. Christopher seemed nervous, jumpy. Brittany was overly cheerful, even for her. And they kept exchanging these looks across the table, like they were communicating in some secret language. After dinner, while we were sitting around talking, Brittany suddenly brought up housing again. "Patricia, I've been doing some research on senior living options in the area," she announced, pulling out her phone. "There are some really nice places that would be perfect for you." I felt my stomach tighten. "I'm happy where I am, thank you. But wouldn't it be nice to have people your own age around?" Christopher chimed in. "Someone to play cards with, do activities with." "I have activities. I have friends." Sophia looked uncomfortable. "Maybe Mom doesn't want to move right now." "Of course she doesn't want to," Brittany said with that bright, fake smile. "Change is scary at any age, but sometimes we have to think about what's best in the long run. What's best? For who?" I went home that night with a sick feeling in my stomach. Something was building and I could sense it like a storm on the horizon, but I had no idea how bad it was about to get. The next few weeks were tense. Christopher's visits became more frequent, but they didn't feel like visits anymore. They felt like inspections. He'd walk through my apartment, checking things, moving things around. He started commenting on how I kept house, how I managed my money, how I spent my time. "Mom, do you really need all these craft supplies taking up space?" he'd ask, looking at my jewelry making materials. "Do you actually read all these books, or are you just hoarding them? This apartment is getting cluttered. Maybe it's time to downsize. Downsize from a one-bedroom apartment. Where exactly was I supposed to downsize to?" But the real kicker came. When I discovered he'd been talking to my landlord, I found out by accident when Mrs. Chen from down the hall mentioned it. "Oh, Patricia, your son seems so concerned about you. He was asking Mr. Rodriguez about your lease terms the other day." My lease terms. My son was discussing my lease with my landlord without telling me. I confronted Christopher about it the next time he came over. "Why were you talking to Mr. Rodriguez about my lease?" He had the decency to look embarrassed at least. I wanted to understand your housing situation better, to help you plan for the future." "My housing situation is fine, and if I need help planning for the future, I'll ask for it. Mom, don't get defensive. I'm just looking out for you." Looking out for me, right. That's when I started paying closer attention to their conversations, their behavior, their sudden interest in my living situation. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge. Christopher and Brittany were struggling financially. I'd suspected it for a while, The comments about money, the way they'd stopped going out as much, the fact that Brittany had started shopping at discount stores instead of her usual boutiques. But I didn't realize how bad it was until I overheard a phone conversation. I'd gone to their house to drop off some Christmas cookies I'd made, and I heard Christopher talking in the kitchen while Brittany answered the door. Can't keep paying this much in rent. The market is crazy right now and we're drowning. If we could just get Mom settled somewhere cheaper, we could. She doesn't need all that space anyway. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They weren't worried about my safety or my happiness. They were worried about their own financial situation, and somehow my apartment had become part of their solution. But I still didn't understand the full scope of their plan. Not yet. December arrived, and with it came the worst Christmas of my life. And trust me, that's saying something considering I'd spent the previous 3 Christmases grieving my husband. Christopher invited me over for Christmas Eve dinner, just like always. I brought homemade gifts for everyone. A scarf I'd knitted for Sophia, a wallet I'd made for Christopher, and a delicate pair of earrings I'd crafted for Brittany. The evening started out normally enough. We exchanged presents, had a nice dinner, and I was actually feeling pretty good about things. Maybe I'd been paranoid. Maybe they really were just concerned about me, and I'd misinterpreted their intentions. Oh, how wrong I was. After dinner, Christopher suggested we all sit in the living room to talk. Something about his tone made me nervous, but I followed along. Sophia was there too, looking uncomfortable again. Mom, Christopher began, and I could hear the rehearsed quality in his voice. Brittany and I have been talking, and we think it's time to have a serious conversation about your living situation. Here we go. We're worried about you living alone, Brittany added, reaching over to pat my hand. At your age, anything could happen. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency? No one would know for hours. I have a medical alert system, I said, and I check in with people regularly. But that's not the same as having professional care available, Christopher said. We found this wonderful assisted living facility about 20 minutes from here. It's clean, safe, and they have activities every day. I felt my blood pressure rising. I don't need assisted living. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Of course you are, Brittany said in that condescending tone people use with small children. But wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about cooking and cleaning and all those daily tasks? I liked cooking. I liked having my own space to clean and organize however I wanted, but apparently that didn't matter. The thing is, Mom, Christopher continued, your apartment is really expensive. The rent you're paying could be put to better use if you moved somewhere more affordable. And there it was. The real reason. Better use? I asked quietly. Christopher and Brittany exchanged one of their looks. Well, Brittany said slowly, Christopher and I have been looking for a bigger place. Our apartment is getting cramped and we're thinking about starting a family soon. Your apartment would be perfect for us. I stared at them. You want my apartment. We want what's best for everyone, Christopher said quickly. You'd be safer and more comfortable in a care facility, and we'd be able to provide you with better support if we were living closer to you, closer to me. The assisted living place was 20 minutes away from where they currently lived. My apartment was 5 minutes away. So you'd be living in my apartment, I said, while I'm in a nursing home 20 minutes away. It's not a nursing home, it's assisted living, Brittany corrected. And it's not about the apartment. It's about making sure you're safe and cared for. I looked at Sophia, who had been unusually quiet through this whole conversation. She wouldn't meet my eyes. What do you think about all this, honey? I asked her. She shifted uncomfortably. I think you should do whatever makes you happy, Mom. At least one of my children still had some sense. But Christopher wasn't done. Mom, I know this is a big change, but I really think it's the right thing to do. We've already spoken to the facility and they have an opening in January. We could help you move your essential items, and anything you don't need, we could take care of for you take care of. Right. I sat there for a moment, processing what had just happened. My son, my own son, had just told me that I needed to move into assisted living so he and his wife could take over my home. They'd already spoken to a facility. They'd already made plans for my belongings. They'd decided my future without consulting me, and they'd presented it all as concern for my well-being. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't the hot, explosive kind of anger. It was cold and calculating and absolutely crystal clear. I need some time to think about this, I said calmly. Of course, Brittany said, looking relieved. It's a big decision, but I really think once you visit the facility and see how nice it is, you'll feel so much better about everything. I nodded and smiled. I'm sure I will. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation and acting like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. In the span of 30 minutes, my relationship with my son had been fundamentally altered. As I was getting ready to leave, Christopher walked me to my car. I know this seems overwhelming, Mom, but it really is for the best. You'll be so much happier with people taking care of you. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. When do you need an answer? I asked. Well, the sooner the better. The facility said they could hold the spot until the end of January, but after that, I'll let you know after New Year's, I said. He hugged me goodbye, and I drove home in Kiel. A daze. But wait, you guys, what happened next is where this story gets really good, because my son had no idea who he was messing with. I'd spent decades being the accommodating wife, the selfless mother, the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. I'd given up my dreams, my financial security, my sense of self to take care of the people I loved. But Christopher had just made one crucial mistake. He'd confused my kindness for weakness. He'd mistaken my generosity for gullibility. He was about to learn the difference. That night I sat in my apartment, and I made a list. Not a grocery list or a to-do list, a battle plan. Because if my son thought he could manipulate and guilt me into giving up my home so he could benefit financially, he was about to get the surprise of his life. I called in sick to my volunteer work the next day. I had more important things to do. First, I called my lawyer. Yes, I had a lawyer, the same one who'd helped me navigate Marcos's estate and my financial recovery. He was a kind man named Mr. Peterson, who'd always treated me with respect and honesty. Patricia, good to hear from you. How can I help? I explained the situation to him, and I could hear his disapproval through the phone. That's quite a situation, he said carefully. What are you thinking of doing? I want to know my options, all of them. We talked for over an hour. By the time I hung up, I had a clear understanding of exactly where I stood legally and financially, and it was better than I'd thought. You see, the apartment I was renting, the landlord, Mr. Rodriguez, had been trying to sell the building for 2 years. The market was hot, and he was tired of being a landlord. He'd mentioned it to me several times, always followed by assurances that any new owner would have to honor existing leases. But what if the new owner was me? I called Mr. Rodriguez that afternoon. Mrs. Patricia, how are you? I'm well, thank you. I was wondering if you were still interested in selling the building. There was a pause. You want to buy the building? I want to know what you'd want for. We talked numbers. The building was small, only 8 units, and while it needed some updating, it was in good shape overall. The price he quoted was steep but not impossible. Can you give me a week to think about it? Of course, Mrs. Patricia. Take your time. But I wasn't going to need a week. I was going to need 3 days. I spent the next day calling everyone I could think of who might have insights into my son's financial situation. I talked to Sophia, who reluctantly confirmed that Christopher and Brittany were in serious financial trouble, credit card debt, behind on their car payments, struggling to make rent. I didn't want to say anything at Christmas, Sophia admitted, but he asked me for money last month. He said it was just temporary, but how much did he ask for? $5,000. $5,000. And instead of coming to me for help, his mother, who might have actually been willing to assist if asked honestly, he decided to manipulate me into giving up my home. I was getting angrier by the hour, but I was also getting more determined. The third day, I drove to my bank, all of it, every account, every investment, every penny I had access to. I sat down with the financial advisor who'd been helping me rebuild after Marcus's death. I want to make a significant purchase, I told her. Can you walk me through my options? We spent 3 hours going through everything. My savings, my small retirement accounts that I'd managed to rebuild, the life insurance payout from Marcus that I'd barely touched because I was too afraid to spend it. It turned out I had more than enough. Not just enough to buy the building, enough to buy the building and renovate it and live comfortably for years to come. Marcus, bless his soul, had been more financially responsible than either of us realized. The life insurance policy he'd maintained even through his illness was substantial. Combined with my careful saving over the past few years and the growth of my small business, I had options my son knew nothing about. I could buy the building. I could renovate my apartment and turn it into exactly what I wanted. I could become a landlord and have rental income to supplement my other earnings. Or I could do something even better. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with Mrs. Chen a few months earlier. Her daughter lived in a beach town about 3 hours away, and Mrs. Chen had mentioned that property values there were surprisingly reasonable because it was just far enough from the major cities to be considered remote. I called Mrs. Chen that evening. Oh, Patricia, how lovely to hear from you. How are you doing after that family dinner? I'd mentioned to her that I was feeling stressed about something, though I hadn't given details. I'm doing well. I was wondering if you could put me in touch with your daughter. I'm interested in learning more about her area. Of course. She'd love to talk to you. She's always saying how wonderful it is there and how she wishes more people knew about it. Mrs. Chen's daughter, Linda, called me the next morning. My mom says you're interested in the coast? Are you thinking of visiting? I'm thinking of moving there. We talked for 2 hours. Linda told me about the small seaside community where she lived, about the affordable housing, the quiet lifestyle, the beautiful beaches. She sent me links to real estate listings that made my jaw drop. For what Christopher thought my 1-bedroom apartment was worth, I could buy a 2-bedroom house with an ocean view. But you know what? I was just getting started. I spent the next 3 days making phone calls and crunching numbers like I was preparing for war, because in a way, I was. By December 28th, I had a complete picture of my options, and let me tell you, they were better than I'd ever imagined. Option 1. Buy my building for $480,000, renovate my unit into a gorgeous 2-bedroom, and become a landlord with steady rental income. Option 2. Sell everything, move to Linda's beach town, and buy a beautiful house with an ocean view for less than half of what I'd pay here. But then I thought of a third option, and this one was perfect. I called Linda back. Linda, I've been thinking about what you told me. Is there any chance you could show me some properties this weekend? I know it's short notice. Are you serious about moving? Because I have to tell you, there are some amazing deals right now. People are practically giving houses away because they think it's too remote. I'm very serious. In fact, I'm so serious that I want to pay cash. There was a pause. Cash? Patricia, are you sure you want to do that? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That Saturday, I told Christopher I was going to visit an old friend for the weekend. It wasn't technically a lie. I was going to visit Linda, who I was definitely planning to be friends with. The 3-hour drive to the coast gave me time to think, to plan, and to get angrier. Every mile I drove, I thought about my son's betrayal. How he'd looked me in the eye and pretended to care about my well-being while planning to take my home. How he'd enlisted his wife in this manipulation. How he'd made plans behind my back and presented them as if I had no choice. But I did have choices. I had more choices than he could possibly imagine. Linda met me at a small cafe overlooking the harbor, and I liked her immediately. She was about Sophia's age, with laugh lines around her eyes and paint under her fingernails. "You're an artist?" I asked, nodding at her hands. "I try to be. I moved here 5 years ago when I got divorced. Best decision I ever made. The light here is incredible, and the cost of living meant I could actually afford to pursue my art full-time. We spent the morning looking at houses, and each one was more perfect than the last. But then Linda showed me the house that changed everything. It was a small 2-bedroom cottage about 50 yards from the beach. It had weathered shingles, a wraparound, porch and windows that faced directly toward the ocean. The listing price was $290,000. "The owner is motivated to sell," Linda explained as we walked through. "She inherited it from her aunt but lives across the country. She just wants it gone." I stood on the back porch, looking out at the endless expanse of blue water, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. "Peace. I'll take it," I said. Linda laughed. "Don't you want to think about it? Maybe see a few more properties?" "No, this is the one. How quickly can we close?" "With a cash offer? Probably within 2 weeks." 2 weeks. Perfect. I made the offer that afternoon. Full asking price, cash. With a closing date of January 15th, the seller accepted within hours. I drove home that evening with a completely different energy. I wasn't Patricia the victim anymore. I wasn't Patricia the woman whose son wanted to warehouse her in assisted living. I was Patricia the woman who was about to start the most exciting chapter of her life. But first, I had some business to take care of. I called Mr. Peterson on Monday morning. "I've made my decision about the apartment situation," I told him. "Oh? What did you decide?" "I'm moving. But I want to make sure I do this right. I want to sell my lease, sell my belongings, and relocate without giving Christopher and Brittany any opportunity to interfere." "That's certainly your right. What do you need from me?" "I need you to handle the legal aspects of breaking my lease and dealing with my landlord. I also need you to draft a letter to my son explaining my decision. And I need all of this to happen quickly and quietly." "How quickly?" "I want to be moved and gone by January 20th. That's ambitious, but doable." We spent an hour going over the details. Mr. Peterson would handle all the legal paperwork. I would handle the logistics of moving and selling my belongings. But first, I had a New Year's Eve party to attend. Christopher had invited me to their annual party, just like every year. Normally, I would have made appetizers and brought a nice bottle of wine. This year, I was going to bring something much more interesting. I spent the week between Christmas and New Year's getting my affairs in order. I arranged for movers, contacted real estate agents about selling my furniture, and started packing the items I wanted to take with me. But I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. As far as my neighbors knew, I was just doing some post-holiday cleaning. The hardest part was not telling Sophia. I wanted to, but I was afraid she might accidentally say something to Christopher. I decided I would call her after everything was settled. New Year's Eve arrived, and I dressed carefully for the party. I wore my favorite dress, a deep blue one that Marcus had always loved, and the pearl necklace he'd given me for our 25th anniversary. I wanted to look like the confident, independent woman I was about to become. I arrived at Christopher and Brittany's apartment fashionably late, carrying a bottle of champagne and a small gift bag. "Mom!" Christopher greeted me with a hug. "You look fantastic. How are you feeling about everything?" Everything. He meant his ultimatum about assisted living. "I'm feeling very clear about everything," I said with a smile. The party was the usual crowd, some of their friends, a few neighbors, Brittany's sister and her husband. Everyone was drinking and laughing and having a good time. I mingled, made polite conversation, and waited for the right moment. It came just before midnight. Christopher tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. Before we count down to the New Year, I just want to say how grateful Brittany and I are for all of you. This past year has been challenging, but we're excited about what 2026 has in store. Challenging. That was one way to put it. Actually, I said, standing up, I have an announcement too. Christopher looked surprised. Oh, okay, what's up, Mom? I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. I wanted to let you know that I've made my decision about the living situation we discussed. Christopher and Brittany exchanged one of their looks. I could see the relief starting to spread across their faces. That's wonderful, Mom. I think you're going to love the assisted living place. When do you want to visit? Oh, I'm not moving. To assisted living, I said cheerfully. The room went quiet. I'm moving to the beach. Christopher's smile faltered. The beach? Yes, I bought a house. A beautiful little cottage about 50 yards from the ocean. I close on January 15th. You could have heard a pin drop. You bought a house? Brittany's voice was barely a whisper. I did. I paid cash for it too. Turns out I'm in much better financial shape than any of us realized. I looked directly at Christopher. Your father was more financially responsible than we knew, and I've been quite good at managing money myself. Christopher was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. But what about your apartment? What about it? We thought. You thought I'd give it up so you could move in? I asked innocently. Oh, honey, I'm not moving out until January 20th. After that, it'll be available for whoever wants to pay the rent. The color drained from Brittany's face. But we already talked to Mr. Rodriguez. Did you? That's interesting, because I talked to him too. He mentioned that someone had been asking about my lease terms. I smiled sweetly. I hope you didn't make any promises you can't keep. Christopher was starting to look panicked. Mom, wait. Can we talk about this privately? Of course, dear. We stepped into the kitchen while the other party guests tried to pretend they weren't listening to every word. Mom, you can't be serious about this. About which part? Buying a house at the beach or not moving into the nursing home you picked out for me? It's not a nursing home, it's assisted living. Christopher, do you think I'm stupid? The question hung in the air between us. Of course not. Then why did you think you could manipulate me into giving up my home so you could solve your financial problems? His face went white. That's not what this is about, isn't it? You're behind on your bills, you asked Sophia for money, and suddenly you're very concerned about my living situation. What a coincidence. We are concerned about you. No, you're concerned about yourselves. And you know what? That's fine. People get into financial trouble. But what's not fine is lying to me, manipulating me, and treating me like I'm some confused old woman who can't make her own decisions. Christopher started to say something, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You want to know what hurt the most? It wasn't that you needed help. It was that you didn't trust me enough to be honest with me. If you'd come to me and said, Mom, we're struggling financially, and we were wondering if there was any way you could help us, we could have had a conversation. I might have been able to help you. I might have been willing to help you. Would you have? I guess we'll never know now, will we? I handed him the envelope I'd been carrying. What's this? My new address. In case you ever want to visit. He opened it and read the card inside. It was simple. Just my name, my new address, and a phone number. Mom, The countdown is starting, I said. We should rejoin the party. We walked back into the living room just as everyone began counting down from 10. 10, 9, 8. I looked around the room at all these people who had no idea what had just happened. 7, 6, 5. I looked at Brittany, who was staring at me with an expression I couldn't. Quite red, shock, anger, fear. 4, 3, 2. I looked at my son, my firstborn, the little boy who used to tell me I was the best mom in the world. Happy New Year! Everyone cheered and hugged and kissed. Christopher came over and hugged me, but it felt different now, distant. Happy New Year, Mom. Happy New Year, sweetheart. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation and acting like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and we all knew it. When I left that night, I hugged Christopher and Brittany goodbye. Congratulations on the house, Patricia, Brittany said. Her voice was steady, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. She was already trying to figure out her next move. Thank you, dear. Christopher walked me to my car. Mom, I hope. You know that we really do care about you. I know you think you do. What does that mean? It means that caring about someone and trying to control them aren't the same thing. I got in my car and drove home to my apartment, for one of the last times. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Movers, real estate agents, paperwork, phone calls. I sold most of my furniture and donated clothes and household items to charity. I kept only the things that were truly meaningful to me. Photo albums, a few pieces of jewelry, some of Marcus's things, and my craft supplies. Christopher called me several times during those 2 weeks, but the conversations were strained. He kept asking if I was sure about this decision, if I thought it through, if I understood what I was doing. I understand perfectly, I told him. I'm choosing to live my life on my own terms. But you'll be so far away from family. You mean I'll be far away from you? Sophia lives 4 hours in the opposite direction, remember? I'm actually going to be closer to her. He didn't have an answer for that. Brittany tried a different approach. She called me crying one afternoon. Patricia, I'm so sorry if we upset you. We never meant to make you feel like we didn't care about your feelings. Brittany, you literally had already spoken to an assisted living facility without consulting me. You made plans for my future without my input. How exactly did you think I would feel? We just wanted what was best for you. There was that phrase again. What was best for me? As if I wasn't capable of determining that for myself. What would be best for me? As if my family treated me like an adult who can make her own decisions. She was quiet for a moment. Are you ever going to forgive us? I'm not angry, Brittany. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. The most surprising call came from Sophia. Mom, Christopher told me what happened. I just want you to know that I think you're amazing. You do? Are you kidding? You bought a house at the beach with cash. You're like some kind of badass grandmother. I laughed. I'm not a grandmother yet. Well, when you are, you're going to be the coolest one ever. We talked for over an hour. Sophia told me she'd suspected something was going on with Christopher and Brittany's finances, but she hadn't realized how bad it was or what they were planning. I should have said something sooner, she said. At Christmas, when they were pressuring you, I should have spoken up more. You couldn't have known. Maybe not, but I could have been a better daughter. Sophia, you are a wonderful daughter. Don't ever doubt that. Will you send me pictures of your new house? I'll do better than that. I'll invite you to visit. January 15th arrived faster than I expected. I signed the papers for my new house in Mr. Peterson's office, and just like that, I was a homeowner. Again, I spent that night in my old apartment surrounded by boxes and packing materials. It felt strange to see the place so empty, but also exciting. Tomorrow, I would start my new life. I was loading the last of my boxes into the moving truck when Christopher showed up. Mom, please, don't do this. I looked at my son, really looked at him. He was pale and thin, and there were dark circles under his eyes. For the first time, I felt sorry for him. Christopher, this isn't about punishing you. This is about me choosing to live my life the way I want to live it. But we're your family. Yes, you are, and I love you. But love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my happiness for yours. What if something happens to you? What if you get sick or hurt? Then I'll handle it the same way I handled your father's illness. The same way I handled losing our house. The same way I handled starting over at 64. I'll figure it out." He stood there for a moment, looking lost. "Will you at least call us? Let us know you're okay." "Christopher, I'm moving to the beach, not to Mars." "Of course I'll call." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure when that would be. The moving truck pulled away, and I got in my car for the last time as a resident of this city. As I drove toward the highway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The drive to my new house took 3 hours, and I spent every mile thinking about my new life. I could wake up to the sound of waves every morning. I could walk on the beach whenever I wanted. I could set up a proper craft room and maybe even sell my jewelry at local shops. I could make new friends, try new things, and be whoever I wanted to be. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to consider anyone else's needs or wants or opinions. I could just be Patricia. I pulled into the driveway of my new house just as the sun was setting over the ocean. The moving truck was already there, and Linda was waiting for me with a bottle of wine and a huge smile. "Welcome home," she called. Out. Home. Yes, this was home. The next few days were a blur of unpacking and settling in. I set up my bedroom with the windows facing the ocean so I could watch the sunrise every morning. I arranged my living room around the fireplace and filled it with the photos and mementos that meant the most to me. I turned the second bedroom into a combination craft room and home office, and slowly I started to build a new life. I joined the local community center and signed up for a pottery class. I volunteered at the small animal shelter in town. I started taking long walks on the beach every morning, collecting shells and sea glass. Within a month, I felt more like myself than I had in years. Christopher called me 3 times during my first month in the new house. The conversations were awkward and strained. He kept asking when I was coming back to visit, and I kept changing the subject. Brittany called once, ostensibly to see how I was settling in, but really to fish for information about my finances. "That house must have been expensive," she said. "I hope you didn't spend all your savings." "I'm very comfortable, thank you for asking. It's just that at your age, you need to be careful with money." At my age. I was 67, not 97. "Brittany, I've been managing money longer than you've been alive." She didn't call again after that. But the most interesting development came about 6 weeks after I moved. I was having coffee with Linda at our favorite cafe when she mentioned that she'd heard some gossip. "You know how small towns are," she said. "Someone told me that there's been some drama with the apartment building you used to live in." "Oh? What kind of drama?" "Apparently, some couple was trying to take over a lease from a family member, but it fell through, and now they're in some kind of legal trouble." I felt a chill run down my spine. Legal trouble? Something about making promises they couldn't keep and potentially fraudulent lease applications. I don't know the details, but it sounds messy. I called Mr. Peterson that afternoon. "Patricia, I was wondering when you'd call. I have some news about your son." "What kind of news?" "It seems that Christopher and his wife attempted to take over your lease after you moved out. They told Mr. Rodriguez that you had given them permission and that they would be responsible for the remainder of your lease term. But I never gave them permission." "Exactly. When Mr. Rodriguez contacted me to verify, I informed him that you had properly terminated your lease and that any arrangements with your son were unauthorized." "What happened then?" "Mr. Rodriguez filed a complaint with the housing authority. It seems your son and his wife had also provided false information on their rental application, including claiming income they don't actually have." I felt sick. Are they in serious trouble? They could be. Fraudulent rental applications can result in fines and make it very difficult to rent in the future. But Patricia, there's something else. "What?" "Your son has been trying to reach me. He wants to know how to contact you. He says it's urgent." I thought about this for a moment. "What did you tell him?" I told him that I would pass along his message, but that any communication would be up to you. What's the message? He wants to apologize. He says he understands now how wrong he was, and he wants to make things right. I sat in my beautiful beach house, looking out at the ocean, and I thought about my son, the little boy who used to bring me dandelions, the young man who'd helped me find an apartment after his father died, the man who tried to manipulate me into giving up my home. Tell him I got the message, I said finally. That's all? That's all. I didn't hear from Christopher again for 2 months. When he finally called, his voice was different, smaller, humbler. Mom? Hello, Christopher. I don't know where to start. How about starting with the truth? There was a long pause. We lost the apartment, he said finally. Our apartment. We got evicted. I'm sorry to hear that. We're staying with Brittany's parents now. It's not great. I waited. Mom, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I know I probably destroyed any trust you had in me. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I appreciate that, Christopher. I was scared. We were drowning financially, and I panicked. I thought if I could just solve the housing problem, everything else would work out. And you thought the solution was to put me in a nursing home. I thought you'd be safer there. And I thought, God, this sounds so awful when I say it out loud. I thought you wouldn't mind because you'd have people to take care of you. Christopher, I didn't need people to take care of me. I needed my son to respect me. I know that now. I know a lot of things now that I should have known then. We talked for over an hour. Christopher told me about the financial counseling he and Brittany were getting, about the jobs they were both working to try to get back on their feet. He told me how ashamed he was of what he'd tried to do. Do you think you could ever forgive me? He asked finally. I already have, I said, and I realized it was true. Really? Christopher, you're my son. I love you. That doesn't mean I'll ever forget what happened, and it doesn't mean things will go back to the way they were. But yes, I forgive you. He started crying then, which made me cry. Can I come visit you sometime? He asked. I'd like to see your house, and I'd like to apologize in person. I'd like that too. He visited 3 weeks later, driving down by himself. Brittany stayed behind, which was probably for the best. When I opened the door and saw my son standing on my porch with the ocean behind him, I felt something shift in my chest. He looked older, thinner, but there was something different in his eyes, something that looked like wisdom. Hi, Mom. Hi, sweetheart. We hugged, and it felt real in a way our hugs hadn't felt in months. I gave him the grand tour of my little house, and I could see him taking it all in. The ocean views, the cozy rooms, the sense of peace that permeated everything. Mom, this place is incredible. I know. I wake up every morning and I can't believe this is my life. We sat on the back porch with coffee, watching the waves. I have something for you, he said, pulling an envelope out of his jacket. Inside was a check, made out to me, for $5,000. Christopher, what is this? It's the money I asked Sophia for. I know it's not much compared to what I tried to take from you, but it's a start. I can't take this. Yes, you can. Please, let me start paying you back for what I tried to steal. You didn't steal anything. I tried to steal your independence, your dignity, your right to make your own choices. He looked out at the ocean. I tried to steal your freedom. I looked at the check, then at my son. Are you sure you can afford this? We're managing. It'll take us a while to get back on our feet, but we're getting there. And Mom, we're doing it honestly this time. I folded the check and put it in my pocket. Not because I needed the money, but because I could see how important it was for him to give it to me. Christopher stayed for the weekend, and it was the best time we'd had together in years. We walked on the beach, cooked meals together, and talked about everything. His childhood, his marriage, his fears, my new life. On Sunday morning, As he was getting ready to leave, he said something that surprised me. "I'm proud of you, Mom." "Proud? Of me? You could have just accepted what we wanted you to do. You could have been the victim. Instead, you took control of your life and built something amazing." He gestured toward the ocean. "You're living proof that it's never too late to start over." After he left, I sat on my porch and thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I was a widow living quietly in a small apartment, trying to rebuild my life after loss. My son was preparing to manipulate me into giving up my home, and I had no idea what was coming. Now I was living in my dream house by the ocean. I had new friends, new hobbies, and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My relationship with Christopher was different now, more honest, more respectful, and in some ways stronger than it had ever been. And Brittany? Well, she never did call to apologize. But I heard through Sophia that she'd gotten a job at the insurance company and was working hard to rebuild their credit. Sometimes people change, and sometimes they just learn to hide their true nature better. Time would tell which category Brittany fell into. 6 months later, Sophia came to visit, bringing her boyfriend Jake. They stayed for a week, and I loved having them there. Sophia helped me plant a garden, and Jake fixed a wobbly step on my back porch. "Mom, you seem so happy here," Sophia said one evening as we watched the sunset. "I am happy, happier than I've been in years. Do you ever regret leaving?" I thought about it. I regret that it happened the way it did. I regret that Christopher felt he had to manipulate me instead of just being honest. But regret moving here? Never. What's the best part? "The freedom," I said without hesitation. For the first time in my adult life, I get to decide how I want to spend my days. I don't have to consider anyone else's needs or wants or opinions. I can just be me. And who is that? Who is Patricia when she gets to just be herself? I smiled. I'm still figuring that out, and that's the most exciting part of all. As I write this, it's been a year since I moved to my beach house. I wake up every morning to the sound of waves and go to sleep every night, feeling grateful for the life I've built. I've learned to surf. Yes, at 68. I've started selling my jewelry at a local boutique, and I'm making more money than I ever did with my online business. I've made wonderful friends in my pottery class and my volunteer work. Christopher visits every few months, and our relationship continues to heal. He and Brittany are slowly getting back on their feet, and they're doing it through hard work and honest effort. I'm proud of him for that. And here's the thing that surprises me most. I'm not angry anymore. I was hurt, I was disappointed, but I was never really angry. Because in trying to control my life, Christopher accidentally gave me the greatest gift possible. He forced me to take control of it myself. If he hadn't pushed me toward that assisted living facility, I might never have realized how much more I was capable of. I might have stayed in that apartment forever, living a safe but small life, never knowing what else was possible. So to anyone out there who feels like their family is trying to make decisions for them, who feels like they're being treated like they can't handle their own life, remember this: you are stronger and more capable than they think. You have more options than they realize, and you deserve to live your life on your own terms, no matter what your age. As for Christopher and Brittany, they learned a valuable lesson about manipulation and the consequences of dishonesty. Importantly, they learned that I'm not the helpless old woman they thought I was. I'm Patricia. I'm 68 years old. I live in a beautiful house by the ocean. I make my own decisions, live by my own rules, and wake up every day excited about what's possible. And I've never been happier.